So this is Unit 4, Lesson 5, Solving Linear Quadratic System Using Substitution. So if you remember, we did substitution back in Unit 2. This one is going to be using both linear and quadratic equations. So first thing that you're going to do is you're going to set each equation equal to y. From there, you'll set the equations equal to each other. So that means on either side of the equal sign. From there, you're going to solve for x. Once you finish that, you're going to plug x back into one of the equations to get y. Then you're going to check both equations using x and y. So the same kind of steps are sitting right here, just if you want a different verbiage. You've got solve the linear equation for a variable, substitute the linear equation into the quadratic, simplify and solve for a variable. Quadratic equations may yield two equations. So it's super easy. These ones are going to be our start. As you can see, they're both already set equal to y. So we're just going to substitute the y's. So I've got negative x squared plus 5x plus 6 equals x plus 6. So now I'm going to solve for all my x values. So I'm going to move my x over here and my 6 to get them both onto one side. That's going to end up with negative x squared plus 4x equals 0, because my 6's will cancel. From here, I now have to solve and find my x's. So first part on here, I'm going to take my negative out, and then I'm going to have my negative x. And I'm going to end up with x minus 4 equals 0. And with these two, I'll end up with x equals 0 and x equals 4. With these two, I now go back and plug my x's in to find my y's. So on mine, I've got y equals x plus 6. So I'm going to plug in the 0. So I've got 0 plus 6, meaning for my first equation, my y is going to equal 6. So I've got 0, 6. For my second one, I've got y equals 4 plus 6, so my y will equal 10. So then my final answer should be 0, 6, and 4, 10. So now we're going to do the same thing with b. So as you can see, again, they're both equal to y already. So I'm going to have x plus 3 equals negative x squared minus x plus 6. And just so I can get my negative to go away, I'm going to switch it to the far side. So I'm going to add my x squared, add my x, and minus my 6 to the other side. So I end up with x squared plus 2x minus 3. And from here, I can now factor. So I'm going to do my trinomial x. I have my negative 3 and my 2, which is going to leave me with 2 and 1. I'm going to have it be a negative. I'm sorry, let me repeat that. It's going to be a 3 and a negative 1. So then I'm going to have x squared minus x squared minus 1x, and then I'm going to have 3x minus 3. Simplify those down, and I'll have x minus 1, and then x plus 3. I'm going to find my answers for both of those, and I've got x equals 1 and x equals negative 3. Substitute that back into my equation. So my first one, I've got y equals 1 plus 3. So then my y is going to be 4. My second one is going to be y equals negative 3 plus 3, which means my y will be 0. So my answers in this one will be y 4 and negative 3, 0. Okay, we're going to move on to C now. Same thing, my y's are already equal, so I'm just going to set them equal to each other. Negative x squared plus 2x plus 3 equals negative 1/2 x plus 9. So again, same thing applies here. So I'm going to move over my x squared minus my 2x minus my 3. And I'm going to end up with x squared minus 1/2 x plus 6. When I pull this one apart, I'm going to end up a little bit differently. So I have to find 6 and 5/2. And this one gets a little up. So we'll have the negative 2.5 squared minus 4, 1, and 6. And then we have 6.25 minus 24. And then we have negative 17.25. And no real solutions. So as you can see, we don't really have anything that can work for that, so we end up with this right here because our x doesn't do anything. Okay, so we're going to move on to the next one. So we have 2x squared minus 3x minus 1 equals x minus 3. Move my x over and my 3 over. I've got 2x squared minus 4x plus 2. I'm going to pull out my 2. So I'm going to have 2 times x squared minus 2x plus 1. Then I'm going to do my trinomial. And I'm going to have 1 and my negative 2. So it's going to be negative 1, negative 1. So I'll end up with 2 times x squared minus 1x times negative 1x plus 1. So I end up with 2 times x minus 1. X minus 1, those are the same, so I end up with just x equals 1. And then when I plug in my y equals x minus 3. So I plug in my 1 minus 3, and I get y equals negative 2. And so my answer is going to be 1, negative 2. Then I'm going to move on to our last two on the back. So for our first one, we actually have to switch our first equation to a y equals, and that's going to end up being y equals negative x plus 3. And now we're going to go into putting them equal to each other. So I've got negative x plus 3 equals x squared minus 8x plus 15. So I'm going to add my x and minus my 3. So I've got x squared minus 7x plus 12. And then I'm going to solve the trinomial. So I should have 12 and negative 7, which is going to give me negative 4 and negative 3. So then I have x squared minus 3x, my negative 4x plus 12, which will leave me with x minus 3, x minus 4, which will leave me with x equals 3 and x equals 4. From here, I'll plug back into my original equation of y. So I've got y equals negative x plus 3, and I'll plug in. So then I'll have y equals negative 3 plus 3, which means I'll have 0. So 3, 0. And then I'll have y equals negative 4 plus 3, which means y equals negative 1. So I'll end up being negative 4, negative 1. Sorry, 4, negative 1. And last but not least, we have our f. So I've got to actually change both of these, which means I'll have y equals negative x plus 2. And then I've got y equals negative x squared plus 8. And then I can set them equal to each other. So I'll have negative x squared plus 8 equals negative x plus 2. So I'm going to move over my x squared and my 8. And then I'm going to end up having x squared minus x minus 6. I'm going to do my factoring, and I have negative 6 and negative 1, which will leave me with having negative 3 and 2. So I end up with x minus 3 times x plus 2, which means x equals 3 and x equals negative 2. And then I'll plug them into one of my y equations. So I'll have y equals negative x plus 2. So y equals negative 3 plus 2. So y equals negative 1. So 3, negative 1. Then on this next one, I'll have y minus negative 2 plus 2. Those will change to positives, and I end up with y equals 4. So my final answer should be negative 2, 4. And that is Unit 4, Lesson 5.